How to start this one without sounding dramatic, but if you've been watching NASCAR closely lately, you have probably felt it too. Something just feels off, like we are witnessing a shift that nobody really prepared for. Music, and at the same time, there is this growing tension in the garage, not just about performance, but about the future. Big decisions are coming. Careers might be turning corners. And honestly, it is starting to feel like one of those moments we are going to look back on later and say, yeah, that is when everything changed. Because today, we have got not just one but two major stories that are shaking up the NASCAR world right now. And both of them are connected in a way that makes this whole situation even. And trust me, what is going on here is not just surprising. It is the kind of thing that makes you question what is next for one of the biggest names we have watched for years. So before we dive into it real quick, if you are a real NASCAR fan like me, go ahead and hit that like button and consider subscribing. This channel is brand new. We are trying to hit 15,000 subscribers, and it is all about real talk, real reactions, and everything happening in NASCAR every single week. Alright, so let us talk about it, because this first story is honestly something I never thought I would be saying out loud as a NASCAR fan. We are talking about Kyle Busch. Yeah, that Kyle Busch, the two-time Cup Series champion, one of the most dominant drivers we have ever seen. The guy who made winning look routine for nearly 2 decades is now sitting on a 100-race winless streak. Let that sink in for a second. When Kyle Busch left Joe Racing after the 2022 season and moved over to Richard Racing to drive the number 8, it honestly felt like a perfect reset. And early on, it looked like a genius move. He wins at Auto Club Speedway early in 2023, then gets his third win by early June, and suddenly Kyle Busch is right back in the championship conversation. At that point, it felt like we were watching a full comeback story. But since then, nothing. Music no wins through the rest of 2023, nothing in 2024, nothing in 2025, and now 7 races into 2026, still nothing. That drought has now officially hit 100 races, the longest of his entire career. And to put that into perspective, his previous worst stretch was just 36 races between 2016 and 2017. This is a completely different level, and it is not just the wins. Through 7 races this season, Kyle Busch is sitting 24th in points, and his best finish is only 12th. Not a single top 8 finish yet. And that has never happened at this point in any of his previous 21 seasons, even during the rough years. That is how serious this drop-off is. And then you add in the bigger picture, music, his 19-year streak of winning at least 1 race every single season gone in 2024. Missed the playoffs in 2024 for the first time since 2012. Missed again in 2025. And now in 2026, he is not even looking close to being a contender right now. And here is where things start to get really interesting and honestly a little uncomfortable. Kyle Busch is in a contract year with Richard Racing. He turns 41 years old in May, and now the question is not just can he win again, it is will he even still be in the Cup Series in 2027. And look, we have seen drivers compete at a high level well into their 40s before, so age alone is not the issue. The bigger problem is performance, and also the reality that Richard Racing has not been on the same level as the top powerhouse teams for a while now, even before Kyle got there. So yeah, there is a real argument that maybe it is not just him. But at the same time, NASCAR does not wait for anyone. And with silly season shaping up to be way more chaotic this year compared to 2025, when only 2 full-time rides changed, the situation is about to get very real. So now the big question becomes, is Kyle Busch really going to be stuck at 63 career wins? Or is there still one more chapter left somewhere else? And honestly, we might start getting answers as soon as this weekend, because the next race is the Food City 500 at Bristol Motor Speedway, a track where Kyle Busch has won 8 times on the concrete. This is one of his places. If there is anywhere he can flip the script, it is Music Bristol. But man, the pressure right now is massive. Now let us move into the second part of this story, because this is where things get even more fascinating and honestly a little bit wild. If Kyle Busch does leave Richard Racing after 2026, Where could he actually go? There are 5 real possibilities being talked about right now. First, music, staying right where he is at Richard Racing. And yeah, based on everything we just talked about, that does not sound likely, but it is not completely off the table. There have been small bright spots even during this drought, and if they can find consistency, maybe Kyle decides to stick it out one more year. Still, it feels like a long shot. Second, Spire, and this one honestly makes a lot of sense. They have locked into the number 77 long-term, but beyond that, nothing is really set in stone. Michael Dow is also 41. And Daniel, who came over from Trackhouse Racing to replace Justin, is basically in a prove-it situation after a career with just 2 wins across multiple top teams like Joe Racing and Hose Racing. And here is the key connection. Kyle Busch sold Kyle Busch to Spire after 2023 music, and he has already been running and winning races with them in the Truck Series. There is history there, there is chemistry there, and with his son Busch coming up through the ranks, this could be a long-term family play. Third option, and this one sounds crazy, but we have learned not to rule things out in NASCAR. Yeah, that, the team owned by Rick, where Kyle Busch actually started his Cup career over 20 years ago. Now look, this would depend heavily on what happens with Alex Bowman in the number 48. Bowman has struggled, and he has also dealt with multiple health absences over the past few seasons. If decides to make a change, could they go with a veteran instead of a young driver, especially if they cannot land someone like from racing? And do not forget Com has already been sponsoring Kyle Busch in the Truck Series with Spire. It is unlikely, but not impossible. Fourth, Legacy Motor Club. Now, this one is interesting because of the connection. A return to with 2311 Racing, the team co-owned by, would have made a ton of sense, but that door looks closed. They are sticking with Riley in the number 35 for 2026. Music, and is expected to take that seat in 2027, but Legacy Motor Club, backed by and led by Jimmy Johnson and Richard Petty, is planning to expand to 3 cars in 2027. So if Kyle cannot reunite with, could he team up with 2 legends like Johnson and Petty instead? That is a storyline right there. And finally, the 5th option, stepping away from the Cup Series entirely, music, not retiring from racing completely, because Kyle Busch has made it clear he still wants to win a Truck Series championship, but possibly shifting focus away from the Cup level. And if that happens, he would instantly be a title in the Truck Series, especially with Spire. But let us be real, that is probably not what most fans want to see. Music, and honestly, it might not be what Kyle wants either, because despite everything, it still feels like there is something left in the tank. It is just a matter of whether he can find the right situation before time and the sport moves on. And that is really what this whole story comes down to. This is not just about a winless streak. This is about the future of one of the greatest drivers of this generation. Is this the beginning of the end, or just the setup for one last comeback? As a fan, I am not ready to count Kyle Busch out yet, but I would be lying if I said this did not feel different. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think happens next? Does Kyle stay with Richard Racing, find a new team like Spy, or maybe even Legacy Motor Club? Or do you think we are actually getting close to the end of his Cup career? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let us talk about it. And if you enjoyed this kind of real, honest NASCAR conversation, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to NASCAR Nation Report. We are just getting started chasing that 15,000 subscriber goal and building a community of real fans who live and breathe this sport every week.